So Ryan, what's on your radar?
Kamala Harris, after dropping out of the presidential primary before a single vote was cast, won the Veep lottery anyway, winding up in the White House as Joe Biden's running mate. But the prize wasn't what it seemed, and she spent the first year of the administration watching her political career go up in flames, with Biden doing to her what Obama did to Biden, giving her the intractable, politically toxic tasks that he wants off his desk. First, she got shouldered with gun rights, and then she got the border. For a while, she actually thought immigration might be her ticket to the presidency. She cast a controversial no vote on a bill that would have given legal status to Dreamers in exchange for $25 billion in wall money for Trump. The entire Democratic caucus, outside of the two New Mexico senators, had vowed to vote for the deal, but Harris stunned her party on the floor with her no vote. For a reminder of just how weird things were under the previous administration, Trump was actually against that deal. Either way, it failed. And people reading the presidential tea leaves saw her positioning herself for 2020 as the champion of immigrant rights by steadfastly opposing money for Trump's wall, something her fellow senators running for president would no longer be able to say. In any event, her calculation didn't pan out. But she's not wrong that there's gold in the immigration hills in a Democratic primary for the candidate who can do it right. Which brings us to an opportunity for Harris to salvage her political career. Over the weekend, Senate Parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough issued an advisory opinion suggesting that immigration reform, as envisioned by Democrats, is not eligible for consideration under the rules of reconciliation. Her take, however, is entirely subjective. For something to qualify for reconciliation, it has to pass a 6-pronged test, and it easily clears 5 of those. The final one is the most subjective, and the question is whether the policy's budget impact is, quote, merely incidental. McDonough argued that because the privileges and rights associated with permanent resident status or citizenship are so profound that they can't be measured in federal dollars. And even though the bill has a major budget impact, it's outweighed by the gravity of the policy change. There is no precedent for her take. And taken to its logical conclusion, it would bar reconciliation from being used for anything remotely serious. She previously greenlit drilling in the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge. How can you measure the permanent destruction of the wilderness in federal dollars? But McDonough has done her job and offered her advice, however flawed it might be. It's now Harris's job to receive that advice and make a ruling as the chair. If Harris rules it in order, Republicans would need 60 votes to overturn that ruling. Now, Democrats will run into problems trying to do this because McDonough has an extraordinary amount of affinity from senators in both parties who love that she allows them to punt off their responsibility to govern onto her. But taking a shot at it is a political winner for Harris either way. And given Republican hostility to immigration, there won't be another chance to create a pathway to citizenship for 10 million people for many, many years. If Harris doesn't go for it, her immigration legacy for all time will just be this.
Do not come. Do not come.
So if you're Kamala Harris, that's not what you want to be remembered by in a future Democratic primary, is it?
Certainly not. And she's, I would say, botched her job as the border czar from the outset. She took a trip to Guatemala to deal with the root causes of immigration.
And she attacked them all for corruption.
Correct. And basically then we saw that famous line of do not come. And has since not really engaged at all when we have a massive, refugee crisis on the border with Haitian migrants in the Rio Grande sector. She's just kind of punted it. I would argue that, yes, it would be in her favor. Do I think she's going to weigh in this way? No, I think she's very risk averse. I don't foresee her pursuing this route.
I think she is risk averse, but I am picking up signals that there is a lot of discontent about this particular ruling within the Senate because its implications are so broad and profound. And freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose, right? So she has nothing to lose at this point. Like her path to the White House is almost foreclosed at this point, even though she's the sitting vice president. And so if she doesn't do something different, she's screwed.
Yes, I would agree with that on a personal ambition level. The one thing I would say is one of the biggest motivators for the GOP base to turn out is the idea of mass sweeping amnesty. So it's kind of a foregone conclusion that Republicans are going to take back the House. But if you want to make the Senate really come into contention, I would say go forward with something where you're granting amnesty to 10 plus million people. And
Right.
that's going to pull some people out of the woodwork. So I think that's a calculation the White House is going to have to make. And ultimately, I worked for a vice president, Vice President Pence. In my experience, VPs very rarely step out in front of and get ahead of policy recommendations from the president. So for her to do that, I would think she would need Biden's complete sign off and blessing to go forward with that.
And it's an interesting question because Maggie Hassan is probably the big variable in this one. She's a New Hampshire senator who's up for re-election. She's going to face probably the toughest re-election fight. She, in particular, people say, are concerned about this. There certainly isn't much of a kind of Hispanic community in New Hampshire that's going to drive her, across the finish line. And the Hispanic community in general is split on immigration reform anyway. It's kind of it's oversimplistic to think that that's all you're going to get there. But it could hurt her there. And then if they lose the Senate, then they can't. Then Biden basically can't install any more judges for the next 6 years.
Right. And I think Biden's got the muscle memory of the first Obama term where they did have both houses of Congress, didn't, I would argue, get as much done as they could have forced through in that era, and then having to deal with a split government. So I think he's probably looking from the perspective of how do I at least hold on to the Senate to be able to advance more of my agenda in the years to come and heading into 2024.
And so the question for Democrats is what kind of risk are they willing to take to bring 10 million people out of the shadows? And so far in the past, the answer to that has been basically no risk at all.
And again, I've said it before, I am convinced that if done the right way and not aligned with an election, there are Republicans who would be willing to have a conversation on a pathway to citizenship. You just don't stack it before a midterm or a presidential election, so there's a small window to try to get some of those folks on board.
I highly doubt it, but something's got to give. We'll see.
So Team Rising joins us next to discuss China and the United States' separate plans to reduce carbon emissions. Stick with us.